Oh, hello. Welcome back to another Atomic Cast episode. Hi, it's Tom here again, and today we are joined by Mr. Harry Parkhill.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
That's all right. Just quickly, Harry, could you let us know a little bit about yourself, who you are, where people might have seen you before?
Yeah, sure. I started a podcast a while back called Entmoot, and that's where perhaps people have heard my voice. But I've also been running a YouTube channel to do with the hobby since a couple of years now. But it's really taken sort of a few years to build up into the sort of content that I like doing, which is started coming out recently, called Battle Games in Middle Earth, stolen shamelessly from the original magazines. And I'm also a member of the GBHL committee. I'm the marketing guru, whatever that means. And so I'm in charge of kind of writing things and getting people to write things about on the GBHL blog, and keeping people up to date generally with what's happening in the league itself, the Great British Hobbit League, on the Facebook page, which I'd imagine many people, if not all people, are on. So that's kind of the three pillars of my hobby in life.
Your life, yeah.
That's in terms of the sort of community content stuff. But of course, if you're talking hobbying, it's been years since I started. I think, like many people, I got into the Battle Games in Middle Earth magazines when I was in my early teens, if not earlier, and played little bits and tried to build polystyrene castles and all that sort of stuff when I was younger, and then dropped off a little bit and got back into it when I was older and could drive, and realised there were people out there, the community of the GBHL out there to be able to play the game with. And as soon as I did that, I got completely hooked, basically. So
Yes.
and I regularly play now. And I've got all of the toys, just all of them basically.
And then you've got the occasion, the tournaments as well that you do run yourself.
I should probably mention that. I run a yearly, although last year I had two because of COVID delays and stuff. I run an annual tournament at Lincoln, where I live, and it's called Lord of the Imps, because the imp is the mascot for Lincoln and Lincolnshire. So I run a regular thing. Yeah, that's the guy.
It's not focusing very well, but
yeah, he's essentially There's a whole sort of theme around the imp who is a blighter, and he gets into Middle Earth, and there's some variant scenarios, and there's some special rules, and you get to win an imp if you win the scenario, and things like that. So yeah, there's a fair few elements to my hobby life, I guess, and that's only scratching the surface, really.
Bringing that imp up there was purely just to annoy Nathan, who's almost definitely watching this and going, it's been twice and never won an imp. He was telling us earlier.
That is. I've had a couple of people who've, I think, been to all three of the Imps tournaments, and they say they've still not got the imp, which is, I know it is a frustrating thing to win it. But and the thing is, I've actually been considering not giving it out in the future, because so many, or not so many, but a few people have got all three of them, and I was like, how many imps can anyone possibly want? I mean, they're just 3D printed kind of crap imp statues, but there's definitely a desire to get them. So I'll keep them running for definitely. Now anyway.
There are a few people locally who have said they're going to try and come next year purely to try and get an imp, because I love the imps. He sits on my trophy shelf.
Nice. Well, it is a trophy. It shows that you won Seize the Imp, which is the variant of Seize the Prize that I've developed with the imp that kind of runs away and stuff like
that. Brilliant. That's Harry. I'm here. You've seen me before, hopefully. If you haven't, great. Hello. There's a whole channel and stuff there. Go and look at it.
Absolutely.
We are here today to talk about the GBHL in general, just because we've done a few videos. We had Ali on to talk about winning the GBHL, and we had a few people go, what is the GBHL? And how can we get involved? So we thought it'd be good to reach out to Harry as the marketing guru of the GBHL, just to talk to us a little bit about the league itself, kind of where it came from a little bit, and how you can get involved yourself if you want to. So I guess the first question is, where did it come from?
Well, I mean, I'll preface this by saying I wasn't involved in the establishment of the league, because I've only been involved in it really for the last few years. But I think 4 or 5 years now, because COVID sort of stops time a little bit. I can't quite remember how long it's been, but in essence, the league started when I believe the grand tournaments at Warhammer World stopped happening, because Games Workshop had kind of decided in the sort of mid-teens, mid 2010s that they weren't going to do as much for it anymore. The game looked like it was going to die. Some of the supplements to the second and third Hobbit movie were a little bit lackluster, and this group of people who had loved the game and had been playing it competitively since the start of 2001, I suppose, when it first came out, and kind of thought, well, we like playing this still. There's still X number of them. I think it was only a couple dozen at the most of people early on. I may be wrong on that, but certainly there were a small number of people decided, well, we still like it. We're still friends. We want to meet up and play the game. And because we're all so separate, they decided we'll kind of form a league where people could host events, and then they could all travel to each other's tournaments and still keep the game alive, keep the game playing, and from there it's developed into something significantly larger than that. Because I think at the last count there was hundreds and hundreds of people involved in the 2020-2021 season, which is a bit longer, but I think there was about 550 or thereabouts people playing in the league in the last year, out of a possible 1,000 or so of players who have played over the last few years. So there's quite a lot of people involved across the UK, and tournaments running nigh on every week. I mean, it's some weeks it's even 2 tournaments in a weekend. It's certainly in the height of summer. There are a fair few more, and there's definitely a kind of end of the season in early December to give everyone a sort of Christmas break off before we get cracking again. But yeah, so they're all over the country. There's 3 different regions that the tournaments are split up into now as well. So there's a southern, a central, and a northern region for people who perhaps don't want to or can't travel across the length and breadth of the country, so they can compete in their own little area. I'll say little area; they're not that little. But yeah, so there's all those sorts of things, and it's structured in that way where people can compete in events and keep the game alive. And I guess I think it must be the biggest, if not one of the biggest leagues for Middle Earth strategy battle game across the world, because it's as I say, 540 or so people playing in the tournament scene, who sometimes probably don't even know they're actually involved in the league. So yeah, that's kind of where it started, and the idea is, of course, to bring people together who play the strategy battle game, because it's not 40k, it's not AOS, it's not Flames of War, or Warlord games, whatever they are, that have a much bigger fan base. It's nicer to bring everyone together, I guess, and that's what it's about.
Just according to the legacy spreadsheet thing with all the awards on it, 2013 is the first year I've got up on there. And it's got about 70 odd people registered.
Okay, so way more than I thought. Yeah, a few dozen people I was thinking, but yeah, 70 I suppose it's a few dozen. Yeah. It's 5 dozen. So that's pretty close, or 6 dozen.
Because that's got Mr. Ball winning the first one, which sounds
Ed Ball and Jay Clare, I know was involved pretty early on, if not from the very start, and people like Tom Harrison and Damien O'Byrne who made the sort of helped start the GBHL podcast that has kind of linked into the Facebook group and all that sort of stuff. And actually I've done some chats on this, and other people have touched on it as well, with people like Jamie Giblin, who was the founder or one of the founders of the GBHL YouTube channel, and that which is kind of it's now basically defunct, if not basically it is definitely defunct. But that's all kind of tied in with the Facebook page, which was started, I think, by Dan Entwistle, who is now a writer on the Middle Earth team. So I guess it goes to show where how big this kind of community has grown and what's happened with it.
It's funny you mentioned that podcast, because I used to watch all of their videos back in the day. Listen to it's the Plantier podcast, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, used to listen to that all the time, and that was back in the glory days of all the volley fire and all that fun stuff.
Absolutely.
Brilliant, cool. Yeah, so there's a few things we mentioned during that as well. So the league is obviously it's one big league across the whole country.
Yeah.
And you score points for it by going to these events that are GBHL events. there's currently two kind of tiers to those events, isn't there?
Yeah.
So there's the GBHL 100s and the GBHL 80s.
Yeah, and essentially the difference between those is the 100-point events are considered kind of competitive events. Although I'd caveat with the fact that although they're considered competitive events, they're not. It's not everyone who goes to these events are trying desperately to win and at all costs kind of thing. All Middle Earth events that I've been to, and I've been to pretty much almost all of them now after a few years of doing the podcast. I've certainly traveled across the UK a lot. They're all very fun events, but these 100-point ones attract the kind of top tier players. So if you're doing well in a 100-point tournament, you are likely to be playing against some of, if not all of, the best players in the league. So that's the GBHL 100s, and the 80-point ones I considered more fluffy. Although again, they're not all thematic tournaments. There might just be a smaller tournament, there might be a one-dayer, there might be a doubles tournament, or there might just be a new tournament organizer who started it up and the league wants the league wants people to have had shown experience before they are eligible to be a 100-pointer. So I mean, and usually or often there are some kind of I don't know whether it's thematic scenarios like mine or even have different kind of pointing systems. So it's not just Swiss ranked or whatever it is. So they're usually considered a little bit more of a relaxed start. But as you mentioned, the way that these the differentiation between them is that if you win a GBHL 100, you get 100 points towards the league. And if you win a GBHL 80, you get an 80 point towards the league. But the league takes the best of your sort of 4 best scores. So the best possible score you could get is 500 in total over 400, in total over those things. And then and that's how we decide the winner. And there is a fifth thing for sort of in case everyone's got 500 which but yeah, so that's kind of how it works, which is why when I say the 80 points attract the less competitive players, that's because you can win 4 80 pointers and not even come close to being the top of the leaderboard, because all you need to do is come third or second, which is worth 95 or 90 for the GBHL 100s, to be better than the winner of those GBHL 80 points events.
Yeah, I had a really sore moment last year, like in the last competitive season, where because I won my first GBHL 80 that I went to, but I knew it was a league event. It was very exciting. Got my 80 points. Then we went to another GBHL 100 later on, and someone came 5th or 6th and got more points than me, and I was like, but I won my one.
Yeah,
but then you look at who was playing, and everyone in the top 10 of that tournament is in the top 10 of a league at the end of the league season, whereas mine, there's only a couple of us that were up near the top of the league.
Having said that, I've just had a quick Google, and you are quite high up in the rankings. I mean, you're in the top 40, which is not to be sniffed at. I mean, there's a top 40 out of 540 or so players is very good. So winning that one has clearly paid off for you.
Yeah, it did all right. Yeah, you did. But, yeah, it's all right. But yeah, it was just a thing, because that kind of, it's interesting to note. And then you do think about actually the caliber of player at the 100 is so it's different, because you've got all these people who have come out, and like Ali was saying, he basically doesn't bother coming to any 80s anymore either, because there's just no point for him.
Yeah, and if you, I mean, as you say, no point. I mean, competitive players, someone who really wants to win the league, it's maybe not necessarily worth it. But because you want to go to 4 events in a year, and that's at least and you've got to do well in them or whatever. So some people will just go for the competitive thing. And what's great about this system is that people are in it whether or not they know, and it may well be, as you mentioned, that people have been entered into the league without, by going to 3 or 4 events that classed as having 80 points towards the league. And your name will have been taken down, and your result will be inputted in. So you give it a search. It's on the GBHL website, which we can come to in a bit. But and there's a spreadsheet, a Google Sheet spreadsheet, where you can actually look and see your placing. So I'm way down on somewhere in the hundreds, I think. But either way, it's just worth noting. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to pay anything. You don't have to, ask to be eligible for the league. You just rock up to these events, and maybe it's increasingly different now, but most events that you will stumble across, certainly the big established ones, will probably be awarding GBHL points.
And to clarify, I didn't mean there's no point in anyone going to the 80s. It's only because Ali travels the whole country to go to the 100-point most competitive events, so he can't then take time out to go to all the 80s as well. Whereas for people like you and me, the 80 points are great because they're fun, they're friendly, they're like, and so are the 100s, but the 80s are great little ones like that. We've got a friend of the show, Zahir from London, who we'd done 3 or 4 events through the year, and I noticed he was right next to me in the league, and we had been the whole time. So I was telling him about it, and he went, "There's a league, you can see where you are." And he didn't even know that I'd been competing with him the whole time, trying to get up above him. So then we sent the rankings across to everybody, and I was like,
And I think that's the thing, and hopefully increasingly in this next year or so, as sort of more events kind of are fixed on and not moving around as much, we can. I know certainly I need to do some work to kind of promote the events and talk those events up that are awarding points, and hopefully sell it a bit and kind of go, look, shout about it, because it is fun. I mean, as I'm not a competitive player, really. I mean, I maybe increasingly so over the years, but as I get sort of better and not quite as newbie as I was. But I think now increasingly I'm thinking, maybe I can improve on my position, or improve on my score at least, by doing things. So I'm sort of, I think I was 70th or thereabouts in the league, which is I'm pretty proud of. But that means next year I can try and beat my own score, and it's not necessarily a competitive thing. It's just sometimes it's nice to measure your own success and measure your progress in a game. I love the gaming as well as the sort of the lore and the fluff and the painting, the models. So it's
We've been doing the same thing amongst our own little group, where we've been kind of seeing like, who's higher up, and I'm coming for you next year, and I'm going to get higher than you next year. So it's a really nice little way of just tracking yourselves, even if you're not at the top of the league. You're tracking yourselves amongst your own group and see who's coming higher and higher and fighting out amongst them, which is quite fun.
Yeah, especially if as you say, if you're a group of 4 people who go in a car together to a tournament, and have 3 tournaments that you go to in a year, it keeps track of all the exact placings. And because you might, if you come 17th out of 30 in the tournament, you might not remember exactly what position it was next time, but it's all in there in the league documents. So yeah, it's good.
I guess we've talked about it enough. We should probably tell people where they can find it. So the GBHL website, I'll pop a link to in the description down below for all the things we talk about anyway. But there's a GBHL website. On the website, you can find lots and lots of useful things. So there is, for instance, a schedule for the year, which has got all of the events that are currently registered as GBHL events. So the 80s, the 100s, and a couple of other big ones that you might want to know about.
So the two sorry, I'll just add this. Right. The two that aren't I think the 2 or 3 that aren't always on the calendar are there's the European Team Championships, which is basically a sort of tier above the GBHL. This is where you kind of submit teams of 4 people who've done very well in the league to play against other European teams, which is great fun. And so there's that. There's also Ardicon, which I don't think is in the calendar anymore because it's not a GBHL event. And there are other sort of big tournaments. I know there's a couple in Manchester this year, that sort of team championships, which are largely separate from the league. But still, the calendar is very good. It's a great way of kind of planning your year out, because even though, for example, I haven't submitted my pack and I haven't done everything, it's on the calendar, so you can start thinking about where you're going when, and sort of plan your calendar in advance. And that's on the events tab on the page.
And the great thing about that calendar is that if you hover over the date, there's a link to the Facebook page for that event, for most of the events that have kind of sent that in across. So for instance, the first event this year is actually mine, which is our GBHL 80. So it's going to be our first GBHL event, but we've run several before. That's at the end of January. If you hover over that, you can click on a little Facebook link and it brings you straight to the event page, which has got the event pack and all of the details on it. It is sold out, sorry.
I was going to say, actually, I did have a look. It sold out within minutes, didn't it, from what I gathered?
About 15 minutes or so, just gone, which was a bit scary because we've got 32 tickets for that. And that's the biggest event we're going to have had in Swindon ever for Middle-earth. We started a couple of years ago with an 8-man event and struggled to fill that. So it's really blossoming at the moment, which is really nice to see.
And that's the same with my Lincoln one. I started with a slow grow league, which had about 10 people going to it, and then had 25 or so people in the tournament, and then it went up to 60 or so in the last year. So it's pulling in people, and actually I think quite slightly separate from the thing, the league does sort of pull in people that perhaps wouldn't necessarily travel to see you, and that's one of the great things about it, is it means that you're more likely to meet people from different parts of the country at a GBHL event, because it's pulling in some of those GBHL names as well, some of the people who you might have seen on videos and listened to on podcasts and stuff, which is always nice.
We've now got a nice group of people that we're friends with in London. So like Curtisons are here, and people who've popped up on our channel a few times. But if we go to a London event now, we stay with them. And things like that, which is really helpful. And if they're coming to Swindon ones, they can, like, we're going to go out for dinner and hopefully into things like that. And just, it's a really nice way of kind of keeping in touch with friends across the whole country and making new people, which is great. So that's nice. And just to the GBHL website, and it's a Wix website, and it's got all this complicated URL, but probably the easiest way to find a link to it, or certainly find your way onto the website, is if you're a member of the Great British Hobbit League on Facebook, and 9,500 or just over 9,000 people are, and if you go to the page and click on it, there's a kind of featured articles that are right at the top of the page. So and they're always my posts, and they're links to the blog, so you can get to the website from there. So all you need to do is click on that link, and then you sort of start your journey delving into the GBHL website. That's the Outriders post, isn't it? Yeah, the Outriders post, and they're a sort of I guess a hangover from the very start of the league, which are very long-winded Facebook posts talking about the league, and they're linking now to a blog as well that's either got extra articles or sort of a different hard copy of the thing. And people seem to love them. They've picture galleries and tell you a bit about what's going on in the league, and kind of fancify the results and all that sort of stuff to make them a bit more readable, I guess. And there's this one time my name was on it, and it was really exciting. Yeah, and actually that is the thing. And one of the things to try and do about with those posts is it can flag up the fact that you've won an event, and people like to see these sorts of things in writing. And I know it's only a blog post on a GBHL website, which has only a few hundred hits or whatever a day, but it's nice to be mentioned in dispatches and have a kind of it's the closest thing to having my name up in lights, but I'm never going to get, Well, it is an achievement to win in a tournament, and it's nice to be able to celebrate that. Yeah. Another thing on that website, which is super helpful, if anyone didn't know, is you can also link to the rankings page itself. So we've got the events tab where you can find out about future events. You've then got the rankings tab, which has got the rankings on it essentially. But the beautiful thing about the GBHL, which I think goes a little bit missed sometimes from some people, is that it's not just got the competitive rankings on there, but it also keeps track of all of the sportsmanship awards and the best painted awards, and everything else that you get from these GBHL events are also all tracked on there. Yeah. So you can see, for instance, Scott Whitefoot's name about 50 million times from where he wins all the best lots of best painted awards. But it's great because you can see that side of the hobby as well, and you can keep that is nice. And you can see who for example, if you have a look at when you've just bought a ticket for a tournament, have a look down the list of people who are going, and then you can delve into the league standings and have a nose about and see, that guy's the best newcomer from last year, that guy's a really good painter, maybe I'll go and make sure I try and have a look at his models, and she's been voted the best friend of Middle Earth, and those sorts of things. These are the one of the nice things about this. And you can think, if I don't know anyone, at least I know that Scott Whitefoot is there, and I know that he's got really nice painted models, so I'll seek him out because I've seen his you can find his pictures, and then you'll have that little bit of a nugget of information to say, oh hi, you must be Scott, you're one of the best painters in the league, or something like that. And it starts that conversation, which is these little things that I think are nice little touches, and it is again, it's nice to have that credit to say I won something, and it's there in paper, or not in paper, but in I have definitely been on there and scoped out someone. You know, when they put the matchups up for the day one, I've gone and gone, where is he? Where is he? Go on. It's just one of those little things where it's quite fun to look at, and then you can go, oh, because you also see, oh, he's never been to a tournament before. That could be nice. We have a chat, and then it turns out his name was spelled wrong.
That's everything. Well, it's useful people like you were doing that, because spelling errors do creep in here. There are definitely a couple of people. There's an Irish guy called Donal who's had two different spellings of his name. One is the sort of Gaelic version, the original Irish, and another is the anglicised. And both of them have been in the league. So he realised at one point, it was like, I wondered why my ranking was so low. It's because I've got two different names.
My surname was on twice with the two different spellings.
Patterson, I can imagine that's the case. Yeah,
which was quite fun. Because again, I was a bit like, hang on, I feel like I'm higher. Like, I feel like I've been to at least 2 events. So yeah, it's a great way of checking where you are. You can search the spreadsheet as you would search any other spreadsheet. So you can just search for your own name, you pop up, and you can search for your mates' names. You can search for anything on there, which is really helpful. And you can see the last year's winners and things like that. So you can compare yourself with where you are there, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's again, as you say, it's all on the GBHL website, which you'll link at the bottom menu. So
yeah. And then if you're that kind of like, if you're wanting to really kind of optimize your list, or you have no idea about going to an event and you want to see some ideas for what kind of lists normally do quite well at events, there is also, I can't remember what tab it's on it now.
It's actually called Lists and Stats, which is I
opened up the stats page the other day. That was fun.
Yeah, so there is some interest. I don't know whether the stats page is it? I didn't even know it was working.
It's there. You can get into like a nice spreadsheet and look at stuff.
Oh yeah, so there's some. I think it's I think it's a work in progress, the stats page. But either way, there are definitely army lists and things like that, and I think we'll be updating that. But either way, there's a bit of an archive there of some lists that have won at certain points levels, which can be useful to give you an idea. Bearing in mind, of course, things change. Meta changes or whatever, but so for example, you've got the 2020 winner of the 450 points into the West tournament. That was
which is now an illegal list.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a Rangers of affiliate list without Frodo and Sam and Gollum, so therefore it's no longer legal. But it is interesting to have a look back at these things to see what was doing well, and it can, if you're a newer player, when someone explains to you that there's an FAQ, you've got to put that. You've got to put Frodo and Sam in the list now. It's nice to have a look back and go, okay, that was why it kept winning tournaments.
Yeah, and if you want, you can go and look at the Battle of Borrowed Door, which is an 80-point event, and you can see that my event winning list is on there as well, and everyone can go, oh, why would you say that to an 80-point, you sweaty man? And then you go, well, I didn't know there was a difference between the 80s and the 100s, I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's very useful for people. I know some of the guys in our group have only just discovered it and have been going through going, oh, look at this is a really cool idea. Oh, I want to try that. That's fun. And then on there, you've also got the blog, and you've got painting guides and things like that in those as well.
Yeah, the blog is largely written by me. There's a few people who are getting who sort of dropping in articles and writing stuff up, but yeah, there's a variety of things, whether it's painting guides and sort of updates, or even just some of them are just sort of articles, tactical articles, or just updates on what's going on in the league. It's actually it's quite. I mean, I don't want to toot my own horn too much, but there's quite an archive there of stuff if you're new to the game and are thinking, you know what, I'd love. There's not much content in White Dwarf every time, and where else do I go and read these things? If you're just getting that, when you got that sort of burning desire and you've just got into a new game and you love it and you're just consuming every bit of content, the GBHL page is great, and I think it's perfect for people to have a look at, because there's lots of podcasts and YouTube videos out there, but when you sat on the toilet at work, and you just really want to get some hobby content, the GBHL blog's the place to go, because you can pick up a 5-minute article, have a read of something, and
I'm giggling because the amount of times I've read something you've written or listened to something you've written while on the toilet is probably the time I most hear your voice, to be fair.
Well, I mean, that's encouraging thoughts. Disturbing thoughts, actually.
Must be hundreds of people nationwide. But yeah, obviously that's the GBHL website. There's a few other bits on there, but I think that's the kind of core aspects of it.
Yeah. Just have a look, have an explore.
And it's there for everyone, like not just the people who are interested in the top end of the competitive scene, lots of painting guides and lists of things to get you started, which is fantastic as a resource.
Absolutely.
I guess the last major point to talk about before we've got a few kind of questions and things, if you don't mind, is the running an event itself and that side of the hobby. So we've talked a lot about going to events, and you just kind of find your local events on Facebook and things like that, and they're all on the calendar. But let's say I've been running some local events with my local group, and I'm that guy who runs the events, but I wanted to make my event suddenly a GBHL event, and I want to get involved in the league that way, and so that our group can start participating in the league. What is the best way for us to go about making that a GBHL event rather than a standard tournament?
Again, actually, the answer is all on the website. But I know people don't like to be directed to websites just for that. There is a tab at GBHL events, and you can request a form. And it's this very straightforward form. It is literally just telling us your name and the location, and it starts a dialogue with I think it would be Matt King, who is the calendar boy. He kind of sorts everything out and kind of makes sure that largely it's a bit of a negotiation process, because as we mentioned, the league is pretty full. So I guess the Matt's job is to try and work out, right, okay, so Sam has got a battle for Borough Door in February. So on the 20th of February, there's an event in London. If you also wanted to host an event in London that weekend, then Matt would say, "Oh, are you sure? Can you do the next weekend? Can you do a couple of weekends later?" And try and work out one to maximise the attendance for your tournament and for the other tournament, because the last thing you want is for a small community's calendar to be chock-a-block and divide that sort of 500 or so people into a potential of 250 people or whatever, because it's on the same day as another popular event, and also he try and spaces them out. So that's what he does. And if you get in touch with him, he'll be able to tell you more, and you can send the email this link to this event form to an email address. I think it's gbhlevent@outlook.com. So actually that's a relatively straightforward one. But again, it's all on there, and the kind of the steps are fairly straightforward. There's there's a few rules you have to abide by. One in particular is, we'd like to have events to be all painted and based events and things like that. They must be sort of public, not in like your garage, kind of straightforward things. And there's a few things about sort of having your event pack just double checked over, just to make sure that it's sort of fair, because we don't want to give anyone an unfair advantage because of getting GBHL points just because your event, I don't know, is particularly good for spirit armies or something. I don't know. But yeah, so there's a few little bits and bobs, and then there is a little fee. Essentially, you kind of contribute a little bit to the league, because as we mentioned, this is all going towards a kind of a ranking system, and the winner of each of those ranking systems gets a big prize, like I think the winner of the league this year got a Gimli axe. So and then there's Sting and various other big swords, and there's loads of glass trophies for the Artisan of the Year and the Friend of Middle Earth and Best Newcomer and all those sorts of things. So there is a lot. And there's awards for the southern and the central and the northern region. So all those sort of fees contribute to that, and I can't remember exactly how much it is. It's something like there's a sort of maths, some sort of algorithm to it. It's like a £10 or whatever, and plus 50p for a.
It's something like 50p per head with a minimum of £10.
I think that's it. Yeah. So and they're capped at 50 quid. So it's even if you've got 1,000 people or whatever, then that's it. But yeah, that's the most straightforward way of doing it, is to go to the website if you're interested. Then you'll be able to find it and hope. And I think it is well worth doing. I mean, I know personally from experience doing both tournaments not in the league and out of the league, and so for the league, that it does bring an extra group of people. People will travel further, and they will stay the whole weekend, which is it is kind of useful as a tournament organizer, just to be able to, for the sake of, like I say, potentially 10-20 quid, you can add at least 1 or 2 tickets bought, I would say minimum, for the thing. So I think it's worth doing.
Well, we've gone, to use our group as an example, we've gone from hosting smaller tournaments at kind of 12. I think we've got up to about 20 people for our last one.
Yeah.
And then we made it a GBHL 80, and I sold 32 tickets in about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is just mind-blowing to us.
It's a platform, and just being on that calendar of people going, if the more people who think this is the place to go for tournaments, this calendar, and if you're already on that calendar, then it means that people could look at it quite straightforward, get the link to the event, and know you're going to be on there, and you're going to get a few people spilling over.
I certainly did. I was Googling where a couple of towns were today, trying to work out if they're close enough that I can go. So I found a couple of places now. They're only 2-hour drive. That'd be right. But yeah.
Well, I think at most of my events that I do go to a lot in Nottingham because it's only an hour away from me. But I am willing and have travelled the length and breadth of the country, just because by the nature of going to these tournaments, and for example, there are people from Scotland who come down to England, Dave Reed and Chris Murfitt, who organise tournaments up there. And they come down to tournaments here, and you meet them, become friends with them, and then you start going up to their tournaments, and it expands your horizons. Who would have thought that toy soldiers would do that? Far from that kind of stereotype of nerds all kind of gathering in caves or whatever it is that we all do. Actually, it's a very social experience, and you can be part of it.
Well, I ended up in Wales on a night out with a guy from Scotland and a guy from London, so that was quite interesting. Exactly. And if you're already running a tournament, you're probably eligible to make it a GBHL 80. Like if it's a tournament that you're running and you've done it before, there won't be any difference. You'll just have to.
Yeah, no, there aren't any, as I say, there aren't any particularly strenuous extra rules. The main extra rule is, just someone has a quick look at your events pack to check it makes sense, and they ask that you have only painted models. I think that's the only one that some people will be put off by, but most people are more than happy to paint up a whole army. It adds to the enjoyment, I think. It certainly does for me anyway.
And then that kind of ties us on nicely to one of our first questions, because we asked our kind of community if anyone had any questions about the league. And I did have a little through them, and there's nothing too strenuous. I don't think we've got it. But one of them was, so at the moment there aren't any kind of restrictions on. We've got GBHL 80s, we've got GBHL 100s, and I mean, a lot of GBHL 100s have quite different mission packs as well. So, for instance, Into the West and Lord of the Imps, Into the West has the secret missions, similar to Ardacon. Lord of the Imps, you've got a couple of custom scenarios and things like that. Yeah. Do we think there is ever a case for having a set of tournaments that are kind of uniform in their mission pack, maybe different point scales, but we're going to use a standard 6 mission, like one from each pool of the match play guide, and done. And that's going to make it a nice, even, competitive playing field. Or do we think we're going to keep it how it is?
I mean, to be honest, I'm probably not the person to ask that, because there is a whole committee of us who are deciding these things. So it isn't just up to me or indeed Ali, who's the league coordinator. Yeah. But I know there has been sort of a talk about these things in the past between some of the committee members, and I think what the general conclusion was that it's the variety is what makes the league fun, and you can go and actually for competitive list players. I mean, personally, I'm not super competitive, as I said, but personally, I quite enjoy the challenge of going to somewhere that has slightly different rules or slightly different things to think about. So to try and develop, I don't know, if you're trying to develop an 800-point army that fits all those criteria and then just play that 6 times in a year, that isn't fun for me, because I think, well, that isn't showing my sort of skill off as a player, because it shows that, yes, I can be good with that one army, but maybe not with, a 600-point list or a 400-point list or having to cope with different scenarios. So I think that's the way I would lean towards it. Say, the variety is kind of what makes it interesting. I don't know whether that's what the rest of the committee thinks or indeed have plans for, but I do think I can't see it myself, just because it might put some of the tournament organisers off doing things the way they've always wanted to do them and sort of pushing them out of the league. And I don't know, maybe, but I would have thought not. If you really want those competitive things, there are plenty of tournaments that don't really adapt their rules packs much. So,
I mean, I'm glad you said that, 'cause that's also my personal view, is that if I wanted to play I guess the really obvious example is when we went to the London GT this year. So the London GT is one of 40K's biggest tournaments in the UK. And it happens to be a GBHL 80 for Middle-earth. So it's one of these, it's not quite at that top level of competitive play, but it's still a semi-competitive event. You look down at the 40K players, and they're all playing the same mission. They're all playing on an exactly the same table. And then you go, oh, how's it going? It's like, oh, well, I've played the same army 4 times that I'm playing against because it's really good at these missions. And you kind of go, but one of the reasons I love Middle-earth is that I'll go to a tournament, I'll play 7 games, I'll play against 7 different armies on 7 different scenarios that are all different, and every single game is different. And then I've been to 40K tournaments, and it's very much the same every time. And it's a bit like, well, I really like the fact that Middle-earth's different. That's why I play Middle-earth, because it's different and unique, and everything's more fun.
I mean, I know I've been to tournaments like that where you know you do see some armies cropping up a bit more at some tournaments, and you know that, and that's fine. But I think, you know, for example, for a while there were a lot of Army of the Dead rocking up at tournaments. They'd done quite well in a few of them, and I played a couple of them, and I was like getting really bored of it. But even then, it was only 2 or 3 out of 7 games, and next time I didn't. You know, they just kind of vanished off the radar. So there is variety, and you can also go, well, look, I really hate, I don't know, playing Smaug or something. So you can go, I'm going to avoid the tournaments that are 700 points because that's going to have Smaug in it, you know. Or you want to play Smaug, so go to a 700 point tournament because I can guarantee someone will have it.
Yeah, and it's exactly the same. And like you were saying as well with the thingies. So we were just making some lists for Into the West, if it does go ahead at the end of January. It's 450 points, and then it's got these secret missions that you can score for at the end. It's like, I remember last year actually I struggled to get these. What I need to do is put one of these guys in my list so I can make sure I get these secret missions a bit better. And then you kind of go, see, look, there's a little bit of extra element to it. I quite enjoy that, which is a nice little bit of unique.
I think what as you're kind of alluding to there, you're clearly sort of a more competitively minded player than I am, because I certainly don't look at the secret missions and all that sort of stuff. I look at the points list, the points, and then think, I know roughly what those scenarios are going to come up, and I make sure that I've got a rounded army and that sort of stuff. But largely, I'm thinking mostly about fun. But that's kind of what I like about it generally, is that I can go into the West for 450 points and think, oh, great, I'm going to be playing lots of small armies, like maybe a few hordes, or maybe we'll have Candish popping up, we'll have Numenor popping up, perhaps because of the, you know, the points level, it's different to what you might normally have. And you're thinking, okay, this is great because it's got different limits, and it's got, so that means you're going to be bringing something different as well. So having that variety really does help the variety. And I think it's inbuilt into the league is that I think probably I certainly would start raising points about this in the committee and saying, well, look, suddenly all the events are 800 points and they're all having exactly the same thing. And I would say something, because I know other people would be concerned too, because I think it's off-putting personally.
Yes.
So, yeah.
No, that's good. It's good because I think that's what our general community was saying as well. But on a similar kind of vein, and again, this probably isn't necessarily a you question, but just kind of your opinions on the thing. So we currently have the GBHL 100s and GBHL 80s. But if you're looking at the moment, a lot of the 80s, in particular, and the 100s are selling out in kind of under half an hour and things like that. We're struggling to get as many events. You know, there are definitely people missing out on events purely because they weren't there at the right time. Is there potentially a scope for more events and maybe a third category or something of events? And I mean, that's 2 different questions, I suppose, but
I can split them up. So in terms of, is there a capacity for more events? Yes, there absolutely is a capacity for more events. It's just a matter of how many people are in the community who are willing to put events on, who know about the league, who are willing to contribute to the league to put the events on, and who are willing to get them all sorted. I mean, if for example, 20 people sent in a request to set up an event tomorrow because of this video that's just gone out. So if that happened, we wouldn't reject any of them. I certainly don't think we would, but there would be a bit of a juggle to say, okay, look, 20 events, we've got to split these across the year. So, you know, we're going to have to negotiate. But in terms, so yes, I think you're right. There is appetite for more and perhaps bigger events. It's just a matter of capacity at various venues and the number of people willing to put them on. So that, because for example, currently in June, there's only one event scheduled in the calendar, and the same with August. I mean, I'm sure they will be filled, or there'll be bits, but it means that there's space there. And in terms of putting the second tier, I don't know. I don't know. I think it would. I don't know, maybe, but I can't. I don't see a great deal of value in it in terms of saying, I don't know, having a GBHL 50 or something like that. Because if you really are competitive, would you want to go and try and win a GBHL 50 event? It's not really worth competing for. So more GBHL 80 events, absolutely.
I think the idea thrown around with the third tier was at one point was making kind of a very small number of, it was almost like bumping the 80s down to 50s, and then the hundreds that are there kind of going, well, right, but now we're seeing some 100-man events and stuff coming up in the hundreds. So saying, well, you're going to have, if you've got 60 plus people, you can be a GBHL 100. Other than that, you're now an 80 and then bumping things down. I don't know. That's just what some people are talking about.
Yeah,
and I just thought I'd ask you while you're here.
You're probably right. It is worth considering which events are 100-pointer events, and capacity, for example, at some of the 100-point events might be smaller than others. So, for example, I could have had about 80 people in mine, but I know Charles Sims, who runs the event in Preston in March. He can only have around 30 or thereabouts, and that maybe that's just a historic thing, that some of these events have been 100 points since they started, but they're not. They don't all sell out instantly. It depends on the location. Preston's near north of Liverpool or wherever the hell it is. I'm not quite sure myself. I'm going, but I have no idea where it is. But so there might be fewer people willing to go there, or a smaller community there. Whereas in London, there might be loads of people willing to get to it. And I guess there's trying to find a balance somewhere in between making it fair for everyone, say in London, to have a shot at 100 points, but also people who are in Preston who might not be able to travel or whatever. So there's a bit of a toss up there, and I don't know the answer in complete honesty, but I do think that there's always going to be more capacity for 80 pointers, and even for GBHL 100 events. Once you've done your 80 pointer, there's no reason that next year you can't turn it into a 100 point event, and that would by its virtue spread out the 100 pointers. I think we're in an unusual period in the game because there's been COVID, so it's been stopping some of the established events happening over the last year, and delays and pushed them forward, and there's been kind of crushed together. And then there's this big pent up desire for people who have just started the hobby again to get out to tournaments, and that means that, and also there's limits on capacity in a lot of places, and has been over the last year. So there might be a slight artificial bump in desire for people to get to tournaments. So that might be it. So but in short, I think yes, we could probably fit more 80-point events in, and there's capacity for them. It's just you need to volunteer to host them, because there's only because I mean you've run tournaments, I've run tournaments. There's only so many tournaments people can put on a year without completely spending all their life dealing with the various sort of background tasks that are required to do them. So.
Oh, and the amount of terrain building I've been doing over the last couple of days. I've had a slight realization, but I do need a few more tables. But it's okay. We're getting there. You can see some like hobbit holes in process over there and things like that. There's just stuff everywhere in my room right now, which is just
same with me. I've got a hobbit hole just literally there, wherever. I can't move my finger. There it is. Yeah. But
and some little houses just next to the screen.
But those things are tricky, and I can understand the frustration on people's behalves, and that if you're just new to the community and you're desperate to get to a tournament, and then you get see a ticket for a tournament go up, and then it's gone within 15 minutes. And we have put a rule in place that the tournaments should advertise advertise the tickets are available within a week, 2 weeks, I think it is, or a week.
It's a week's notice.
It's a week's notice. So at least people have a chance to see it and set their alarm if they're really desperate to get to something. And inevitably you're going to miss it. People are going to miss it. So for example, the way Facebook algorithms work, I'm friends with a few people in the league. So when someone posts something about their event, I might be more likely to see it than you, for example. But these things, this is what the calendar is for, this is what the blogs are for, and hopefully if you follow these things via the website, you should have a good chance of being able to access these things.
And the other thing that I will say that I see a lot pop up is so for instance with our event, I know there's a chap locally who was saying he was got a bit missed out. However, I have a reserve list for my event. I've already got through about half of my reserve list with popping people on, because people are kind of, especially at the moment, if people get pinged, that's it, they're out for 2 weeks. And various other illnesses and work commitments and things like that pop up. I messaged you to come to Lord of the Imps about 3 days before and was like, hey, don't suppose you've got a space, have you? And then you're like, actually, I do, yeah.
I think you'd literally messaged me an hour or something after the person had dropped out, and I was about to post a thing saying I've got a spare ticket, and then you just snapped it. I was like, oh, that saved me a job. And that is true. That does happen, and as you say, quite rightly now in particular. But generally, people have in their heads, or some people, cannier people might go, well, I'm going to buy a ticket for all these events in the hope that I'll be able to get to them all, and then reality hits, the overdraft starts or whenever, and they go, actually maybe I've overdone it, and they start refunding them maybe a week or 2 weeks or a month before an event. So yeah, do put yourself on the reserve list. I almost always there's people making into those things. So yeah. And
if you're local as well, make sure you're known to the tournament organizer, because the last one I ran, which was a 20-man, wasn't even a league one. I messaged someone the night before and said, someone's just dropped out because they're poorly today. Can you come? It's fine. Like, come along, be my ringer, and just play for the event, and you'll get to come to the events and you'll get to play and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. That is true. And if you've got your eye on an event and you don't actually have the money for it, message the tournament organizer and say, look, just so you know, I'm available that weekend. I can be your ringer. And 9 times out of 10, so I certainly will go, great, thank you. I need another ringer just in case, because this last time my ringer dropped out as well. So luckily someone else was there who was able to play. But
if anyone wants a ringer to turn up and try and win the event, that's my new favourite thing, I've decided. So let me know. I will be your super ringer, and I will try and win your event as a ringer.
Why not?
Just to annoy everyone.
And as we've sort of alluded to this calendar, some of the events further along in the calendar haven't yet got the Facebook event links that are there or whatever, but they do have the names of the people who are organising them. So if you search, say for example in June, Chris Murphy in Scotland is organising a tournament called Leith Lorien, which is fantastically named.
I enjoyed that one. Yes,
that's a great name. And he's organising it. He might the Facebook page isn't there. His name is. You could always message him, say, look, Chris, really keen to come to this tournament. Would you be able to send me a direct message? I can't guarantee you remember, but I certainly wouldn't if you asked me. But you never know. At least you're on the radar, and someone might go, oh, I remember someone sent a message to me about this tournament, and that helps.
And we've got a local Facebook group for our guys as well.
Yeah.
So if you join that, I'll make sure I put all the events in any event details in there, as well as the GBHL, just so that you're more likely to see that then, because there's only kind of a few people in there. So by joining that, I try and get my local crew in as well and everything like that. So if you are, just search on Facebook for, say you live in Bradford, just search Bradford Middle Earth, and you'll there'll be something there, or Swindon Middle Earth, or wherever you're from.
And just so many people just post in the GBHL itself saying any gamers in X area, and there's always someone who pops up, or someone like me will go, oh, I know someone who lives there, tag them in it, and it's sorted.
I posted our local group into the GBHL today and got 10 more people joined it who all apparently live within half an hour's drive, and I was like, well, we could have been playing this entire time.
It happens.
But yeah, it's great. And the other thing is that we've been asked a lot about is where the tournament organisers get their terrain from, because you go and you see these events such as Imps with 80 people and Into the West with 100 and things like that, and you go, heck, that's an awful lot of terrain for for a new tournament organizer?
Yeah. Where do you get them from? Well, so when I did my first event, it was 30. It was 30 cap, and I ended up having sort of 20 something. And I was aware that I needed to do a lot of tournaments, so I hosted it at a lot of terrain. So I hosted it at a local gaming club, and they were able to give me half of it, and I did half of it. And the next time it was 60 or so, or 50 or so, and I just built it. I built a lot of terrain. I invested a lot of money in it, and mats and things like that. And it is almost certainly. In fact, someone messaged me about this today, saying, and I sort of said, ultimately, it's an investment running a tournament, and you got to have hundreds of pounds worth of investment in it to be able to get the terrain. But having said that, there's a network of nice people who are coming to tournaments. More often than not, at least 5 or 6 people who come to your tournament will probably be able to bring a table's worth of terrain. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've always had like a few bits of terrain kicking about, whether it's a few Rohan houses or whatever, or even might be like, oh, actually, this tournament organizers asked for extra terrain, so I might make a river or whatever. So I think it is always a concern, and I'll give you that, because nobody wants to be that tournament that's not got the terrain, especially because in the Middle Earth community generally the terrain is very good. But so I'd say this is one of the things. Start a tournament small. Start your 30-man tournaments. You've got 15 tables to do. Maybe appeal for 5 people to bring terrain. Then you've got 10 tables to fill. You might be able to beg and borrow a couple from a local gaming club or whatever, and build the rest or buy the rest. But it's still going to be a lot of money, because I mean, a table's worth of 3D printed buildings, for example, is going to be £100 or thereabouts. So you've got to factor that into when you're doing it. But I sort of took the view that a long-term investment of money in terrain will be worth it for having a nice tables of terrain at my tournaments. And I think the cost wasn't necessarily a problem for me, but the time spent on it is something you do definitely have to factor in, because I mean, you mentioned your terrain building. There is always a sort of manic period of a couple of weeks before a tournament thinking, have I got enough terrain? And I'm lucky now that I think I'm around 60. I don't really want to go much higher than 60 because of the terrain. And it's not just the actual building of it and stuff. It's the transporting it backwards and forwards. Like, I have a garage, but I don't have a trailer or a van or anything. So there's all those things. But the short answer to the question is, you've got to provide it yourself. And I think there is a hope to try and do something in the league to kind of have a bit like a support system of terrain between tournament organisers, and the regional reps are going to be sort of helping in that. So there are people who are being elected to be the North, the South and the Central League rep. And that will mean there might be someone who's a good port of call to be able to ask for terrain, and usually they're tournament organisers as well and stuff like that. So yeah, beg and borrow. There's a good community out there, and utilise it.
Yeah, the prime example, I think, just to chime in, is that for again, to use my example here that's coming up in a couple of weeks' time, we're doing 32, so I've got 16 tables. Yeah. I'm borrowing about half of that from a local club. Another big chunk of it is my own. Some of it I've bought with the money from selling some of the tickets. I've then bought the terrain and built it myself. And then a few other tables have been brought by some nice local guys that are coming along to the event, who I messaged and said, look, I know you guys have got a nice little gaming setup at home. Would you mind bringing some stuff along, and we'll sort you some stuff out in return down the line? And they've absolutely agreed. So yeah, just post in your local groups and ask around.
I think that is the best way of doing it, and more often than not, if there might be a small incentive in it for them, buy them a drink, or I give out a prize, and I know Warren Reading do this. They have a prize for the best board, so people have kind of gone out of the way and gone, oh, okay, that's worth me bringing, and it's just incentivizes it a little bit. So I mean, the last tournament I ran, there was this amazing Hobbit board bought by a guy called Chris Cooper, who had little Hobbit holes, and they had little lights in them, and chimneys that smoked, and all these sorts of things. And he arrived very close to the start of the tournament, and I'd already set up all the boards and we didn't need another board. But he said, "Oh, look, I've brought this board and I've put a lot of effort into it and all that sort of stuff." So I was like, "Yeah, fine, get it on there." Like, so that I had more than I needed, and I'm sure that will be the case if you. It might be more difficult if you've got, say, 15 people or 16 people at the tournament, but once you get to a certain number, you're likely to be able to get somebody who can bring a few bits. So, like, I mean, I'll be able to bring a box if you ever got in a tournament I'm there, I'll be able to bring a crate of.
Anyone wants to message me at all who's coming to our event and say, "Yo, I'm coming to the event. I've got a box. I've got this really cool kind of Minas Tirith board that I love, and I spent ages building. I'd love to see other people's thoughts on it and put it out to play because it's only ever been in my shed." Absolutely. Let me know you're bringing it. Bring it along. I'll put a table aside for you. Chuck it on there. The more cool, unique tables and stuff we can get to these events, the better.
Yeah, exactly. And also, and just alluding, because you alluded to it about the 40k thing, terrain is really important in the game. And the more people who bring terrain, the more full the boards are, the more interesting the boards are, the more interesting the games are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, more terrain the better, always. Even if you just got like a little part box full of like really cool, unique like walls and signs and stuff that you've made, we can make that work somewhere and we can get it on, and it's like just your kind of cool diorama, and it makes it a little bit nice when you like, oh, I'm on my board and I can play, if you've got a Hobbit army that matches your Shire.
I was going to say that, and people do love it when they've got a thematic matchup. You've got Moran and Orcs against Minas Tirith and Osgiliath veterans or whatever on an Osgiliath board. That's great because it's just perfect for immersion, isn't it? Everyone loves that.
Yeah, that's the real reason we all play Middle Earth, isn't it? Because we've got to play. You watch the films, you want to play your favorite bit from the film. Let's be honest,
exactly.
It's so good. Brilliant, cool. I'm not sure how much else we've got in the tank to ask you, to be honest, my friend.
That's fine.
We've just about covered everything everything to do with the league and events and things, I hope. If anyone does have any further questions, do chuck them down in the comments and stuff, and I'll try and answer them. And if I can't answer them, I'll just send a message over to
just drop me. I'm sure you can drop me a note if they say, "Oh, there's a few people who ask questions in the comments," and I'll hop in on the comments as well and answer them as well. I just want to add about tournaments. If you're even slightly concerned about going to a tournament because you think, "Oh, I don't know anyone," or it's a big distance or anything like that, I genuinely say don't be like that. And I know it's impossible if you're you're anxious about meeting people and meeting strangers and stuff. I know saying don't be anxious is very unhelpful. But I just want to try and stress the fact that I'll admit I'm an outgoing person, so I'm naturally kind of okay at sort of meeting strangers and stuff, but there are plenty of people who turn up at these tournaments who have a great time, and you meet the first person you meet, you have a good game, and you will be you'll be sort of getting updates on them throughout the whole day, and you meet people and you build these relationships, and that's a great thing. And if you need any more reassurance, my podcast is built around tournaments, and you can hear this some of the people about 5 or 6 people in every podcast who I play games against, and they're all usually all willing to talk about the games. They're always willing to, and they're all talking about how much fun they're having, and the tournament organisers are in the podcast as well. So if you're looking for reassurance about what events are like, do listen to Entmoot. I know it's tooting my own horn a lot, but it is worth it because it is genuine experience of people who go to tournaments, and I think that can be quite valuable. So
we also have a little playlist on the channel which is it's called Competitive Battle Reports, and I stick a camera on every tournament I run. We stick a camera on the table, we just leave it there running. So you can hear all the chat around the table and everything, and it's all just they're just playing a game. I will say I went to my first ever GBHL event, which was the Battle of Borough. I went on my own to London, which was scary enough, to be honest, because I'm a little country boy. So yeah, went out to London on my own. A couple of people came up to us. I mean, admittedly, I've got a bit of a shoe in because we do, we're on the YouTubes and the internet, and people have seen us before. But some people came up and said, "Oh, I recognise you from this. How you doing? Let's have a chat." Started having a chat, played some games. I mean, I was competitive in my games. I ended up winning a thing, but made some friends, met up with them at a future tournament, stayed with one of them when we've been down to London before and things like that. And it's all just from rocking up to an event on your own and having a chat.
Yeah. Ultimately, these events are there to facilitate the game, obviously, and but also to bring people together who have a passion for the game and Middle Earth and painting and just generally being quite social and having a bit of fun. And you know, there's a league and a competitive element to it as well, but more than that, really, it is just trying to facilitate people meeting each other who have the same passions, and I think it's well worth going to get behind.
I think I would refer to them as events rather than tournaments.
Yeah,
it's one of the things I try and do.
Better.
Yeah, in the back of my head, it's an event. It's not a tournament. I'm going to go play Middle Earth for the day, and it's great because you get 4 games in, which is my kind of monthly quota of games. I know for some people it might be 2 or 3 months worth of games, depending on your schedule. But you get all of these games in one go. You're surrounded by people who love to sit, and you can kind of express your inner Hobbit. I mean, dress up, go full character if you want. And if you are really nervous, latest podcast episode. If you are really nervous, drop the TO a message in the event page and just say, hey, look, I've not been to an event before, or even I've never played the game before, which I've had. And can you kind of give us a nod? And what I've done is, I know I've got a couple of guys in my local group who are super friendly, super helpful, and they're not there to try and win the event, and you know, they're to have fun. And I've said, yeah, lads, this guy, you know, he's coming down for the first time. He doesn't know anyone. Are you all right to kind of take him to lunch or something and just kind of show him where somewhere good to go get food is? And by the end of the event, they're hanging out, meeting up for future games and stuff like that. And it's just a great way to meet people, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would reiterate that about messaging the TO and just sort of almost seeking reassurance and saying, well, because I've had a few people ask, you know, this is a GBHL 100 event. Is this like a really competitive? Is everyone going to be really, you know, angsty about the game? And I've sort of tried to reassure people, yeah, it is going to attract some of the competitive players, but if you're not a competitive player, you might play one game against a competitive player and then, you know, vanish. And you'll be playing against all the fun people and people who've got thematic armies. And, you know, not to say that the competitive players aren't fun, because they are fun, but, you know, it's worth noting that, you know, that it's people are having fun and maybe just having fun in different ways. So you have the fun tables down the bottom, which are always fun. And that's where people are, you know, it's always a bit upsetting sometimes if you end up near the top and you can just hear laughter and happiness coming from down there. Yeah, and you're just sweating and like, oh God, why am I doing this to myself? I've done that a few times. I've managed to do quite well on the first day and then been like, oh God. And then I think the next day I lose my first game or second game and I'm like, okay, I can breathe a bit more.
I had that on Imps where I was up on the top table after for the first kind of, I think it was game 2 and 3 and 4, I was on top. And then 4, I was like, I'm tired and I'm hungry and I want to go home. And then it just kind of all went wrong for a few games. Absolutely. But, you know, brilliant.
Yeah, I would reassure people that they are worth going to. And
yes.
And check out the website. It's good.
Check out the GBHL website. Come to any events. Go and listen to Harry on the podcast. Go to his YouTube channel, which is Battle Games of Middle Earth. There'll be links to podcasts and YouTube channels and everything down there. The GBHL website will be down there. GBHL Facebook group will be down there. God, it's going to be so many links. It's going to love it. Our shop's going to be down there. Sod it. Plug everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thanks for sticking around with us for this long. And if you've got any comments, chuck them down there. And I hope you'll see you next time.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.